They called me a dreamer. A hobbyist. A girl with glitter and gadgets. They said I had no real job, no real future. And for a long time, I believed them. Not because they were right, but because their voices were louder than mine. The sun was setting behind my aunt's house, casting a soft golden glow across the backyard. Smoke curled up from the grill, and my cousin Jonah was already halfway through his speech about landing a new consulting contract with some fintech giant. Everyone was listening, hanging on every word like it was scripture. I stood near the drinks table, half holding a plaque I'd brought from the Pacific Innovators Summit. It was an award for most promising AI application in biometric tech. I'd worked 2 years to build the prototype that earned it. But to everyone here, it may as well have been a glittery participation ribbon from a science fair. And then I heard it. Still chasing clouds, Lena? My Uncle Victor's voice cut through the hum of small talk like a jagged edge. He was holding a beer in one hand, grilling tongs in the other, and wearing that same smug smile he always did when he talked about me, like I was a punchline he never got tired of telling. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel exactly. But it wasn't kind either. It was that polite, dismissive chuckle people give when they're too bored to be mean but too proud to listen. I stood there frozen, the plaque now await in my arms. "Uncle Vic," I said, steadying my voice, "I wanted to share something about the launch." He sighed loudly and cut me off. "Sweetheart, can we talk about real achievements for a second? Jonah just signed a deal with Arvantes Global. Let's not kill the vibe, alright?" My mother shifted in her chair, eyes trained on her hands. My aunt patted my arm. "You were always so crafty," she said with a soft smile. "Remember your paper sculpture phase?" I smiled back. Tight-lipped. Nodded. But inside, something snapped. She was talking about my first iteration of the NeuroBand prototype, an early model built with copper wire and flexible polymer panels. I spent weeks on that version. It wasn't a craft project. It was the foundation of my company. To them, I was still the girl with glitter and glue. I slipped into the kitchen, away from the swarm of proud relatives. Pulled out my phone. A message was waiting from Tessa, my co-founder. "Investor confirmed for Friday. Final demo has to be airtight. They're flying up from LA." I typed back fast. On it. Not telling the family. They wouldn't get it. What I didn't say, they never did. And they never would. Until they had no choice. I pocketed the phone, squared my shoulders, and walked back outside with my best mask on, nodding through the rest of the evening like I hadn't just swallowed fire. 3 years ago, I started NeuroFlux out of a tiny studio apartment above a Chinese takeout place. Rent was cheap, and the internet was fast. That's all I needed. Tessa and I were both neuroscience grads who'd met at a machine learning hackathon. Our idea was simple but radical: use neural signals to measure real-time emotional responses, and use that data to power adaptive digital environments, ads, music playlists, even user interfaces. Everyone told us it was impossible. Too messy. Too abstract. Too niche. They said, try UX design. Or teaching. Or therapy. Something softer. We heard, be smaller. We said no. We maxed out credit cards, built a team of 3, then 5, then 7. Worked 12-hour days, 7-day weeks. Ate ramen, slept on the floor of the office. No one outside that cramped workspace saw the vision. Least of all my family. When I won a National Women in Tech Fellowship, my dad asked, "Did they give that to you because you're a girl or because the project's good?" When we hit our first $100,000 in revenue, my cousin Jonah said, "You know, I could probably build something like that in a weekend if I tried." So I stopped telling them things. I stopped sharing wins. I stopped looking for applause in rooms that were never going to clap for me. But I didn't stop building. And now, 3 days before the biggest pitch of our lives, I was still being reduced to glitter and pipe cleaners by a family that didn't even know how to spell machine learning. The irony? I wasn't just some girl with a gadget. I was the CEO of a neurodata company on the brink of a $5 million Series A. And they'd see. Maybe not today. But soon. That night, I sat in our downtown co-working lab, whiteboards covered in sketches, my laptop blinking with unfinished pitch slides. Tessa handed me a coffee and collapsed into a chair. Barbecue? She asked. I nodded. Same story. Different setting. She raised a brow. What was it this time? They think our ink sensors are arts and crafts. She snorted. Classic. We laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. That was the thing about being underestimated. You either let it crush you, or you learn to weaponize it. We were the latter. Let them keep thinking we're nobodies, I said, opening the final slide deck. We'll let the valuation speak. Tessa grinned. Louder than words. 3 days later, we walked into the mirrored conference room at Hobbyist Ventures. 10 executives. 1 table. 7 cameras. We didn't blink. I stood, looked Gregory Halberg in the eye, and began. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. What we're about to show you isn't a product. It's a paradigm shift. And for the first time in my life, everyone in the room listened. 3 minutes into the pitch, I saw it, the moment when everything shifted. It was subtle. A pause in scribbling. A tilt of the head. One of the investors leaned forward, elbows on the polished walnut table. Another exchanged a glance with her associate and gave the faintest nod. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Using real-time neural feedback, I said, pointing to the dashboard on the screen, NeuroFlux predicts a user's decision-making patterns with over 84% accuracy. Not based on what they say. Not based on what they did. Based on what they feel, before they know it themselves. I tapped the screen and let the data visualization bloom. The projection showed a side-by-side simulation, our predictive system mapping emotional response against consumer behavior, milliseconds ahead of every mouse click, every menu selection. That's your competitor's model, I added, gesturing to the sluggish red curve on the left. And this, I pointed to the adaptive feedback loop glowing green on the right, is us. Luis, seated beside me, didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He knew we had them. And the investors? They finally knew it too. We'd rehearsed this presentation 12 times, morning, noon, and deep into nights, fueled by vending machine coffee and stubborn resolve. Tessa had stripped out every buzzword. I'd rebuilt the slide deck to be sleek and stark, no fluff, no filler. Just results. We didn't want them impressed. We wanted them convinced. And it was working. Even Gregory Halberg, the famously stone-faced managing partner of Halberg Ventures, was now leaning back in his seat, his fingers steepled thoughtfully. How do you address data security? He asked. I was ready. On-device encryption using federated learning models, I replied. No raw neurodata ever leaves the user's wearable. Only adaptive trend outputs are stored, and even those are anonymized through decentralized blockchain ledgers. That got a few raised eyebrows. And one impressed chuckle. We've already begun onboarding beta testers in the healthcare and edtech sectors, I continued. Preliminary results show a 38% increase in behavioral compliance and a 21% reduction in cognitive fatigue in learning environments. More nods. More scribbles. Pens moved with new urgency now. Gregory rested his chin on his hand. And what's the vision beyond predictive engagement? I looked him dead in the eye. Redefining human decision-making. Not just tracking it, but enhancing it. From therapy to education to UX to commerce. We're not building software, I said. We're building cognition infrastructure. Silence. Then. I want in. We walked out of that conference room into the elevator like astronauts returning from orbit. I didn't even press the lobby button. I just leaned against the wall and exhaled for the first time in hours. Luis turned to me, stunned. They want to lead the round. I nodded slowly. Did he say the number? He showed me his phone. Initial offer, $4.8 million. Pre-valuation, $90 million. My knees went weak. We had come here looking for a lifeline. We walked out with a rocket. The next 48 hours were a blur of legal calls, celebratory takeout, rapid-fire texts between lawyers and advisors, and strategy huddles with Tessa about how to scale our team without losing our culture. And through it all, I didn't say a word to my family. Not because I didn't want to. Because I knew they'd never hear it the way I needed them to. Until the headlines hit. We'd asked the press to hold the story until next Monday, after paperwork cleared and the contracts were finalized. But someone at the firm leaked it. Tessa barged into my workspace, breathless, eyes wide. "Lena, it's Liv. Everywhere." I grabbed my phone, heart pounding. Boise startup shocks tech world. NeuroFlux raises $4.8 million Series A to reshape predictive AI. Lena Navarro, the 34-year-old founder redefining emotional intelligence tech. From basement to breakthrough, the woman quietly building the future of decision science. Forbes, TechCrunch, VentureBeat. Even the Boise Gazette ran a banner headline. Local innovator scores $90 million valuation in groundbreaking AI deal. My inbox exploded. Old classmates. Ghosted dates. Professors I hadn't heard from in years. VCs who never responded to my pitch decks. And yes, even a few distant relatives. But not a word from my mother. Not a text from Uncle Victor. Not even a proud of you from Jonah. Just silence. Later that evening, as Louise popped a bottle of cheap champagne over tacos in the lab, I stepped out to the patio and called home. The phone rang twice. Navarro residence, my mother said, her voice as clipped as always. "Hey. It's Lena." A pause. Then a long sigh. "I suppose you think we're impressed," Uncle Victor's voice growled as he took the phone from her. "All this noise in the business pages. Making a spectacle of yourself." I blinked, stunned. "The press ran it early," I said. "I was going to tell you." "You always needed a stage," he snapped. Headlines. Applause. Jonah built his career the right way. Quietly. Respectfully. Not flashy. That was when the old Lena would have apologized. Shrunk. But not this time. This time, I stood taller. "I built NeuroFlux from nothing," I said calmly. "With no help. No family fund. No trust. Just grit, code, and belief." He scoffed. "Well, let's see how long it lasts before reality hits you." I smiled, sharp and slow. "This is reality," I said. "And the company you said was a toy is now worth more than your entire portfolio." A pause. Then he tried to speak again. I hung up. Not out of disrespect. Out of clarity. I went back inside, champagne in one hand, and looked around at the team we had built from sweat and sleepless nights. "Let them ignore us," I said, smiling. "We'll keep building." Tessa raised her glass. "To the doubters." Louis added, "And to proving them all wrong." We toasted. Laughed. And let the press clamor. Because this time? We weren't going back to explain ourselves. We were going forward, and letting the results speak louder than any family dinner ever had. The driveway was packed. Minivans. SUVs. A few company sedans. The kind of cars you'd expect at a retirement party in the suburbs, nothing flashy, everything practical. Except mine. The fire-retardant X7 purred like a panther as I eased it to the curb, the custom carbon fiber body gleaming beneath the late afternoon sun. It wasn't just a car, it was a message. A whispered reminder that maybe, just maybe, they'd been wrong about me. I stepped out slowly, heels clicking against the pavement. My dress was sharp, a sculpted cherry red wraparound number that made me feel like every inch of the woman I had become. Not the version they remembered. Not the hobbyist, not the emotional one. Today, I wasn't walking in as someone they ignored. I was walking in as someone they could no longer avoid. Inside, the backyard was a curated picture of middle-class celebration. Strings of fairy lights twinkled overhead. A big white tent sheltered long tables dressed in linen. The grill smoked happily near the fence, and Uncle Victor stood at the center of it all, tongs in hand, beer in the other, surrounded by co-workers and cousins. As I stepped through the gate, the music skipped. Not really, but it felt like it. A half dozen heads turned. Conversations stalled mid-sentence. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just walked, gracefully, confidently, like I belonged. Because for the first time, I did. "Is that Lena?" My cousin Nate, the one who used to borrow my notes in high school and joke about my robot toys, was now staring like I'd landed from another planet. I handed him my keys with a slight grin. "Mind parking that for me? I hear you're the car guy." He blinked. This is the X7, isn't it? Fully loaded. Be gentle. He nodded wordlessly, climbing into the car like it was a spaceship. I turned back to the house, heels sinking slightly into the grass, the breeze lifting my hair just enough to feel cinematic. And then I saw her. My mother. She stood near the buffet table, hands fluttering around plastic forks and napkins. Her eyes landed on me, and something shifted in her expression. Pride? Shock? Maybe a touch of fear. "Lena," she said slowly, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "You look different?" I offered, kissing her on the cheek. She nodded. "Where's Uncle Victor?" I asked, raising the small black box in my hand. "Brought him something." She gestured toward the grill. "He's holding court," she said. "Perfect." As I approached the grill, the conversation around Uncle Victor thinned. He was in his zone, talking about marbling and searing temperatures like he was prepping a TED Talk. But when he saw me, his face froze. "Happy retirement," I said, holding out the box. He looked at it like it might bite him. "You didn't need to bring anything." "I wanted to," I replied, calm and even. 30 years in engineering, that's something. He took the box but didn't open it. Instead, he turned back to the steaks. "Can't let these char," he muttered. "Wouldn't want to ruin the main event," I said smoothly, turning and walking away before he could throw in a jab. On the patio, I found Jonah and his wife Michelle under an umbrella. They stood when they saw me. "Quite the entrance," Jonah said, his voice clipped, that classic smirk wavering ever so slightly. "Nice ride." "Thanks," I replied, letting the silence stretch. "Mom said you had some news?" Michelle asked. "We, saw the article. The AI company?" Her voice was cautious. Genuinely curious. I met her gaze and smiled. "Yes. That's mine." "You built that?" "I did." She shook her head in quiet awe. "Lena. That's incredible." I nodded. "It is." Jonah was less graceful. "I mean, yeah, sure, it's cool," he said, adjusting his collar. "But, like, how does it actually work?" I gave him a quick breakdown of neural feedback systems and predictive cognition. He nodded vaguely, clearly lost. "I should have listened to your early pitch," he said after a moment. "Back when you emailed me the demo. I didn't realize. You didn't ask," I said softly. There was no venom in my voice. Just truth. By the time dessert came out, the party had shifted. Aunts who once teased me about my little side projects now asked about data privacy and startup culture. Cousins who used to forget what I did were suddenly interested in AI trends. The whisper network around the lawn had grown loud with murmurs of valuation numbers and magazine covers. And Uncle Victor? Still hadn't opened the box. I didn't push. Let him take his time. Let the weight of his silence speak louder than any thank you could. Eventually, he tapped a fork against his glass. The chatter died down. "Thanks for being here, everyone," he said, clearing his throat. 30 years in this field, lots of mistakes, a few victories, and a whole lot of lunches I'll never miss. Light laughter. He gave the usual shout-outs, co-workers, neighbors, the retirement planning team. Then he paused. "And of course, I'm proud of my kids," he continued. "Jonah, just promoted to senior strategy at his firm. We're all proud." More applause. "And Lena," he said, his voice tightening slightly. The yard fell still. "Who apparently has been building something we didn't quite understand. A beat. I always said she was the emotional one," he added, chuckling nervously. "But it turns out emotional intelligence goes pretty far these days." It wasn't an apology. Not even close. But it was something. As the sun dipped low and fairy lights blinked on, I wandered to the edge of the yard, glass of wine in hand. Uncle Victor appeared beside me, nursing a tumbler of whiskey. We stood in silence for a while, watching the twilight settle in. "You never opened your gift," I said after a long moment, nodding toward the box still sitting on the table. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. I was waiting for things to quiet down. I smiled. "Fair." He took a sip, then said, almost to himself, "CEO of a $90 million company. That right?" "Pre-valuation, yeah," I said. He shook his head slowly. I don't get it. Neural maps. Feedback loops. Back in my day, you built something, sold it, moved on. You don't have to get the tech, I replied. Just get that I built something. And it matters. He was quiet. Then, finally, he opened the box. Inside was a watch. Sleek, modern, engraved underneath. To new beginnings, love, Lena. He ran his thumb over the words. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not quite pride. Not quite shame. But recognition. For the first time, my name wasn't whispered like a footnote. It was spoken with weight. And as I stood there, in the backyard that once made me feel like a disappointment, I realized something. They didn't have to clap for me anymore. Because I was done performing. I was done shrinking. I was done waiting. I had already built everything I ever needed. And now, they were the ones trying to catch up. The invitation was digital, elegant, and barely 3 lines long. NeuroFlux headquarters ribbon cutting ceremony. Downtown Boise, 11 a.m., business formal. Hosted by founder and CEO, Lena Navarro. I sent it to my entire family. No extra notes. No emojis. No please come or hope to see you. Just the facts. Because by now, they knew the story. And they were either going to show up. Or watch the city show up without them. When I arrived at the plaza that morning, the air was already electric. A stage had been set beneath the arching steel canopy of our new building, sunlight bouncing off the mirrored facade. The NeuroFlux logo, sleek, silver, and unmistakable, was proudly displayed across the top. Dozens of chairs were arranged in neat rows. Reporters checked camera angles. A podium stood ready. Startup founders, professors, VCs, even city officials milled about, shaking hands, taking selfies. And at the heart of it all, me. No longer just the girl with prototypes and post-its. Now the woman behind one of the most talked about tech revolutions in cognitive AI. Tessa arrived first, her navy blazer crisp and flawless. She handed me a flash drive. Final remarks. If you want to add anything, now's the time. I didn't. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. Luis arrived next, followed by a string of early investors and our legal team. The mayor was escorted to the front row by one of our interns, looking a little starstruck. And then, just as the event was about to begin, I saw them. Uncle Victor. My mother. Jonah. Even Aunt Carol and Cousin Nate. All standing near the back, stiff and uncertain. They weren't here as family. They were here as guests. The ceremony began with a string quartet. Then came a few speeches, Tessa first, then a city official, then Gregory Halberg himself, our lead investor from Halberg Ventures. And finally, it was my turn. As I stepped up to the podium, the applause was thunderous and sustained. But my eyes found only one thing. The way my uncle fidgeted in his suit, clearly uncomfortable. Good. Let's begin. 3 years ago, I started. NeuroFlux was a pipe dream scribbled on sticky notes, coded on a thrift store laptop, and kept alive by too much caffeine and a refusal to quit. The crowd laughed. But not my family. They watched in stunned silence. I was told, repeatedly, that this idea was too small. Too niche. Too ambitious. That it wasn't real. That I wasn't ready. I let that breathe. But every time someone underestimated us, we got sharper. Louder. Bolder. I gestured to the glass building behind me. And today, we cut the ribbon on what was once called a hobby. Now it's a company valued at $90 million, with patents pending in 7 countries, a partnership pipeline across 4 industries, and a mission to reshape how we understand human cognition. The applause came again, stronger this time. But I wasn't done. People ask me all the time, what's your secret? I smiled. A slow, knowing smile. It's simple, I stopped waiting to be invited. Pause. I stopped waiting for people to believe in me. I stopped asking for permission to be extraordinary. I just became it. The room was silent. And then, as if on cue, Uncle Victor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I looked at him, just for a second, and moved on. I built NeuroFlux because I believed the human mind deserved better tools. Smarter tools. Tools that didn't just track what we did, but why we did it. Because the future of innovation isn't built in code alone, it's built in empathy. Soft applause. A few claps from the press. Even Jonah leaned forward now, his phone half lowered in his lap. After the speech, the ribbon was cut. The crowd moved inside for the tour, networking, drinks. Reporters swarmed. One of them asked me, "Did your family always know this was what you were building?" I smiled politely. They know now. Later, I stepped into the private conference room where the founding team had gathered for champagne and photos. That's when I saw him. Uncle Victor. Alone. By the massive window overlooking downtown. Still holding the gift watch I gave him weeks ago. Still wearing the same uncertain expression. I walked over and stood beside him. He didn't look at me right away. Just stared out at the skyline like he was seeing Boise for the first time. "This building," he muttered. "It's yours." "Ours," I corrected gently. "Built with a team who believed before anyone else did." He nodded slowly. "You were always intense," he said. "Emotional. I thought that would break you." "It didn't," I replied. "It built me." He turned to look at me finally. "I don't understand what you do," he admitted. "Not really. I still don't get how a bracelet can read a brain." "It's not about the bracelet," I said. "It's about listening to what people aren't saying. Feelings. Triggers. Reactions. That's what drives behavior. We just gave that a voice." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I was wrong." I took a breath. "You don't have to say that." "I do," he said, firmer now. "I do. I spent years asking you to be smaller. Quieter. More like Jonah. More like me." He looked down at the watch in his hand. "But you were never supposed to follow us. You were meant to lead." For a moment, the room didn't exist. It was just us, finally meeting eye to eye, after years of walls. "I didn't build this for revenge," I said softly. "I know. But I did build it so that girls like me, crafty, loud, emotional, full of too many ideas, would never again be told to sit down and shrink." He nodded. "I'm proud of you, Lena." This time, I believed him. The rest of the day passed in a blur of applause, champagne flutes, camera flashes, and handshakes. My mom hugged me tighter than she ever had. Jonah asked for a meeting to talk partnerships. Aunt Carol cried during the building tour. And I floated. Not on ego, but on clarity. Because this wasn't about proving anything anymore. This was about claiming it. The new office smelled like new beginnings, glass, steel, and possibility. I stood near the panoramic window of the NeuroFlux headquarters, the skyline of downtown Boise stretching out like a promise. Below me, the plaza still buzzed with the last of the ribbon-cutting crowd, investors, reporters, curious students, and tech insiders. But up here, on the 9th floor, everything was quiet. No applause. No laughter. Just the hum of the servers, the tap of keystrokes from the next room, and the rhythmic beating of my own heart. It wasn't pride. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was something deeper. Completion. Tessa walked in, holding 2 glasses of something bubbly and expensive. "To everything they said you couldn't do," she said, handing one to me. I raised my glass. "And to never shrinking to make them comfortable." We clinked glasses. This wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about release. I remembered that backyard barbecue like a different lifetime, when I stood holding a Tech Innovation Award, only to be told it was cute. When I mentioned launching my app and was silenced mid-sentence by Uncle Victor's proud announcement about Jonah's latest promotion. Back then, they called me emotional. Unrealistic. Glitter girl. They'd never seen the code. Never read the patents. Never asked what I stayed up at night building. They didn't understand it, so they dismissed it. But I didn't stop. I built anyway. Not because they believed in me. But because I did. Now, they saw it. My company on the cover of Forbes. My story on Bloomberg. Our valuation hitting $90 million and rising. My name on the patents. My signature on the acquisition agreements. My vision redefining the future of neuroadaptive tech. They saw it all. Even if they still didn't know how to talk about it. Later that week, I received a text from Jonah. Hey Lena, seriously impressive. Think there's room for a collaboration between NeuroFlux and our firm? 2 years ago, I had emailed him a pitch deck asking for advice. He never opened it. I didn't respond to his message right away. I let him wait. Just like they made me wait for years, through dismissive dinners, mocking smirks, and real job jokes. Except now, I wasn't waiting for permission. My inbox filled daily with requests, venture firms asking to invest in the next round, Ivy League panels inviting me to speak, universities asking me to mentor women in STEM. My story had become a blueprint. But more importantly, a mirror, for every person who was told they weren't enough. The girl whose parents laughed when she coded late at night. The woman whose boss said she was too sensitive to lead. The dreamer whose idea got laughed out of the room. I had been all of them. Now I was here. So I started sharing more, not just numbers or wins, but the real path. The sleepless nights. The maxed out credit cards. The family dinners where I swallowed silence like dessert. The lonely years of building something no one saw coming. I shared it all. And in doing so, I created something more powerful than any algorithm I'd ever designed. Connection. A few weeks later, I hosted a private dinner at the new NeuroFlux rooftop terrace. Just 10 people. The core team. No investors. No press. Just the ones who built this alongside me when no one was watching. We sat around a long oak table, laughing under string lights, sharing stories from our early days, the server crash that nearly cost us our first pilot program, the late night debugging over takeout, the time we had to pitch with a PowerPoint made in the back of an Uber. Near the end of the evening, Tessa turned to me and asked quietly, "Do you miss them? The ones who didn't believe?" I thought about it. My mother, who once said I should get a receptionist job just to feel useful. My uncle, who still hadn't said the words I was wrong. Jonah, who now wanted to do business like the past had never happened. No, I said, setting down my wine glass. I don't miss the people they were. But I hope they're growing into people worth knowing now. Because that's what growth is. Not just building empires. But letting go of needing others to understand before you rise. 1 month later, I received a letter in the mail. Real paper. Handwritten. It was from my aunt. Lena. I owe you more than an apology. I owe you recognition. I owe you belief that came too late. I remember when you were 12, taking apart the toaster just to see how it worked. We laughed, called it quirky. We didn't see the genius in front of us. But I see it now. I wear the Neuro Band every day. It helps me more than you know. Thank you, for not giving up when we gave up on you. With love. Carol. I read it twice. Then I placed it in a drawer, beside every rejection letter, every insult, every underestimated moment I had once used as fuel. Now, they were souvenirs. Nothing more. Months passed. NeuroFlux tripled in size. We opened offices in 2 more states. I flew to conferences. I spoke on stages. I mentored young women who reminded me of my younger self, big ideas, small voices, hungry hearts. And one morning, as I sipped coffee on the rooftop terrace of HQ, I asked myself the question I'd carried for years. Was it worth it? The loneliness? The skepticism? The years of being dismissed by people who should have clapped for me? Yes. Because in their silence, I found my sound. In their doubt, I found my drive. And in the absence of their applause, I learned the most important lesson of all. You don't need permission to be powerful. So if you're reading this, if you're building something in the dark, if they're still calling it a hobby, still calling you emotional, still laughing. Don't stop. Please don't stop. The world needs what you're making. Even if they can't see it yet. Even if they never do. Clap for yourself. Start scared. Start small. Start anyway. That's what I did. And today, I am Lena Navarro. CEO. Builder. Visionary. No longer just the girl they overlooked. Now I'm the woman they quote. And if I can rise from silence to spotlight, so can you.